Welcome to our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast, episode 36. Each week, we will unfold the most recent cyber attacks and will provide you with valuable insights on how to shield your business from these threats, along with practical steps and tips to enhance your cybersecurity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cybersafe Digest, episode 36. Pleased to have you here listening to us. I'm Martin Roberts, Managing Director of NewWays, and I'm here with
Toby Stevenson, Chief Technology Officer at NewWays.
Okay, we're going back to basics a little bit. We're going to talk about something that, for our target audience, is something that you can get underway and do now, and will prepare you for having the right to be in the right place for doing any certifications in the future. And it's just good business practice, and it helps everybody understand what's going on. And it's the thrilling and subject of policies.
Yes, the anti-insomniac dream.
Okay, now it is, we joke about it, but actually one of the problems with a lot of organizations is that people join and they learn what they can do one of two ways. One is what they can get away with, or what they think is okay with their kit and their computers, and also what other people show them and what they can get away with. Policies are there to create a framework and to say to people, you can do these things, you can't do these things, or this is the way you should do that. And we've identified 12 policies for today's show, which we think would be a good idea for you to have. And the great news is here is that there's templates out there on the internet, or if you speak to your MSP or security provider, they should be able to provide these templates. What you should do is read them yourself and adapt them to your organization to make sure that A, you agree with them and it's within the framework that you want to put forward, but also does it suit your suppliers, your customers as well within that framework?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to gallop because we want to keep everybody awake.
We do, yeah, and there is a danger that this could become quite tedious. And I think the point you made, Martin, there were 2 points actually that are really, really valid. So the first is, if you don't have policies, then the way that people use IT is a tribal understanding.
Yeah,
it's what you've heard over the water cooler, or what the person that gave you your orientation when you joined the company said to you, and there's no consistency.
Yeah.
The second thing is, it is the rules of the game. It's how you behave within the boundaries of the computer system within the company you operate in. And if this is not written down and shared with your staff, it's hard to be punitive if they do something wrong because they didn't know.
And I guess the other thing to bear in mind, folks, is that actually, if you're looking for cyber insurance, which you are likely to be wanting to have, it may well be a requirement that you have policies in place and that they are read and signed by all the parties involved. Because if there's a breach and you have a problem, they'll certainly come looking for them.
Definitely.
And if you haven't got them and they're not signed, having been read by people, properly read by people, then the chance of you being paid out may be diminished.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really, really good point, because a lot of the danger with doing policies is that you spend time creating these wonderful documents and you issue them, send them out by email, or tell everybody they're on a file share or on a SharePoint or a Teams page or something like that, pat yourself on the back and move on. And actually, you need to make sure that people have read them, they accept the contents, they accept that they understand the contents. And it may be that they need to be several versions of the training of the explanation of it, because there is a danger that some of these policies can become very wordy, and to if you have a very non-technical or even only a semi-technical user base, the danger is that they don't fully grasp the contents, and it may be that there needs to be supplemental training to support the policies.
And I think that's a key thing. If you are introducing policies for the first time, you've got to do it in a structured way. I would suggest that you have training sessions where you have several people in the room, you outline what they are. You might get somebody to help you. You explain what the policies actually do, what they mean, and what people are signing up to. And by the way, some of these policies might just have some questions hanging over them about people wanting to sign them. And then once you've got the policies implemented and signed by people, you need to make sure that they're refreshed on a regular basis. Both the policies and the people are refreshed about the contents of those policies and updates, as you would any personnel manual. And then finally, all new starters get exposed to these policies and understand them. It's no good simply posting them on your intranet and saying they're there. You need to get people to read them and understand them. It might be two levels in this policy. One might be the plain English version, which is summarization, and then the full wordy version, which might be for legal context.
We've seen that with some clients. They've quite in-depth and detailed policies, and then they have a single sheeter to summarize it, pulls the salient points out. You must do X, Y, and Z, you must not do A, B, C.
And actually, in preparation for this meeting, Toby, you've managed to condense all the different 12 policies to 2 sheets, which is finely well spaced, whatever, which is a good substitute for the 478 pages, which is the full document. I am joking.
Well, but it is that. And I think having this kind of summary is really important, because the other problem that is you often see with certain policies is that they creep in scope. So they start off about subject A, and then it kind of feels logical to broach into subject B, and then it's where is that information stored? So the way that we've got this broke down for our own use today actually helps set the scene of what's included within the policies.
So we're now, Toby, going to make this a quick fire thing. Okay, so I'm going to announce the policy name. And you in less than 50 words are going to summarize what the policy is.
I'll try my best.
Okay, and the great thing about it is, Toby, is that if you are successful, you will have won the grand prize, which I'll tell you about.
Oh, wow. Okay, fine.
Right, so number 1, acceptable use policy, or AUP.
Right, okay, so this is a really important first step. So this is for defining what is acceptable and unacceptable use of the company IT systems. So it is likely to include internet usage, email usage, software that you can and can't use, how hardware is procured. It may also set guidelines for the personal use of company resources. So what can you do in your spare time with that computer? Can you go onto personal websites? Can you go and look at Facebook at lunchtime? That kind of thing.
Good. Very good summary. This is a good start, folks. Okay. The next one is security policy.
Fine. So this is all about outlining the measures that are deployed to protect the data and the IT infrastructure. It may include things like password management, details around access control, possibly even encryption standards. So the way that you're going to be encrypting data, how the VPNs are configured, etc.
Okay.
It may also refer to incident response and how to handle security breaches.
Okay.
And depending on the size of your organization, this may be a sufficient good starting place for that information to be. Normally, these would be in a separate policy, which we'll come on to later.
Okay. Number 3, data protection and privacy policy.
Yeah, very important one here. This basically talks about how the organization aligns to various data protection regulations, so GDPR, things like that. It should make reference to how personal and sensitive data is collected, processed, and stored. So this might be HR systems that include information around the employees. Depending on the nature of your business or organization, it may extend further than that. If you're dealing directly with end customers and consumers, it may have their personal information. If you're in the education sector, there may be something around minors in there as well. So it should define how all those things are pulled together.
Okay. Number 4 is backup and disaster recovery policy.
Yeah, a really important one, and actually with a good bit of luck and a fair wind, a lot of the stuff here is already being done. It's just not documented.
Absolutely.
And what this should do is it should detail how you're doing backups, where you're storing them, how you might recover your data and return everything to service after a disaster. Crucially, it should also identify which are the key systems and what the order of recovery should be.
Okay. BYOD, or bring your own device policy.
Yeah, so this is kind of the inverse of the one earlier, which is how you can use company resources for personal use. This is how you can use personal devices for company use.
Okay.
So this is essentially setting the rules and the guidelines around using your own equipment to log on to work systems. So might be using your home PC to access company email, is a typical example, or maybe using your own phone to access company email, Teams, those kinds of things.
And typically, just as a side note, the most contentious policy of all.
Yeah, this one is absolutely guaranteed to cause major issues, but it's also the one that's going to come back and bite you if you don't have one. So in this policy, we'll also should be setting the expectation around the security requirements, the company's device management of that personal equipment, and the sorts of things that they should be and shouldn't be allowed to do on there. And it should include guidelines for doing updates and how to look after the data on there and things like that.
Lovely. The software management policy.
Yes, yeah, this can be a tricky one, especially if you've got lots of software that you've acquired over many, many years. This is essentially detailing how you go about buying software, checking your licenses, checking the usage. As part of this, it should provide the steps for making sure that you comply with the right software agreements and product use rights of the tools that you're using. And it should also include how those bits of software will be updated and what that update schedule should be.
Okay, so we could wait. That's half time, folks. The whistle's gone. We're changing ends, but we're not going to change positions. So the second half starts with number 7, which is the network security policy.
Yeah, so here we're talking around how we are securing our company network. So this may talk around the firewall, how VPNs are used either for site-to-site connections or remote access, how we monitor the network, so both for availability but also for security threats. It should also talk around Wi-Fi and remote access, not necessarily just VPN, but any other remote access methods that you use. So if you use tools like TeamViewer or things like that, they should be incorporated in here, talking about how they are secured and the controls that are placed around them.
Okay, here's one we touched on slightly earlier, the incident response policy.
Yeah, and this is a good one to have in its own right, because this is theoretically the one that's going to be iterated the most. So this is essentially the blueprint for responding to IT incidents, breaches, outages. What do we do when we have an incident? How do we respond to it? As part of that, it should define roles and responsibilities. So who needs to be involved? So people that can make a decision about things, people that have got the right technical know-how, people that know how to speak to the public potentially, or speak to the employee base. As part of this, you should decide what you're going to say to whom and when. So if you do have a cyber incident, you want to be very careful about who you tell and who they tell. So you might decide that employees that we've had a cyber incident, but you probably need to tag on the end.
Don't tell anybody else.
Tell anybody else. Don't tell your partner. Don't tell the customers. Don't tell anybody yet. There's an official communication channel, and this is about laying those blueprints for how that happens and trying to put guardrails in so that the communication is controlled.
Okay. Which sort of leads into the next one, but not on a particular incident, but the email and communication policy.
Kind of view this one as an extension of the acceptable use policy. This should define and suggest how things like email and instant messaging tools, so Teams, Slack, things like that, how they should be used. Include Zoom and other video calling solutions. It should talk about how they're used, what kind of things you should and shouldn't do on there. What is appropriate business etiquette for those things. So, for example, if you're on an externally facing video call, don't be sat on the video in your pajamas in your bedroom. That kind of thing.
I should stop that, is what you're saying.
Well, turn the camera off.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
But as part of that, it should also make reference to how the transitive email is secured. So what phishing and malware protections are in place there, and how inappropriate content is perhaps filtered. I'll talk about that email filtering piece in there as well.
Okay, and I think it's worthwhile just saying again, and we've said this in previous podcasts, make sure that people use email as they would if they were talking face to face with somebody. That never use the wrong type of language. There have been instances in the past where people have talked about on email about the state of another company and brought it in their own company's disrepute by doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's cost a lot of money. Nothing to do with security per se, but with actually the behaviour of the company, how it's judged. Okay, an employee onboarding and offboarding policy.
Yeah, and I think this is a really, really important one. And it talks around what do you do when somebody starts? What do you do when somebody leaves? So
Yeah.
we know that when somebody starts, they have to have their account set up and have licenses bought and all their access is created. It may include security training, may include training on these policies so they understand what the rules of engagement are. That's really, really important. And one of the things that we want to try and get away from, if we can, is copy Dave or
Yeah,
copy Sarah.
absolutely.
Be specific in what you, because the danger is that people accrue permissions over their
They do.
tenure, and you can inadvertently give somebody more access than they need. So be quite specific in that. And offboarding is similar, and actually onboarding is normally done fairly reliably in most organizations, even if there's not a policy,
Yes,
because someone can't work without it being done.
absolutely.
Offboarding, on the other hand,
Yeah.
can be a bit hit and miss, and it varies organization to organization.
Yes.
And the reason for that is that somebody from the warehouse leaves or somebody from a remote office leaves.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily always filter back to
Yeah.
the right people at the right time. And the danger there is if someone leaves, particularly if it's under a cloud, is they have still got access to the system and you are reliant on their goodwill and nature to not take any punitive action. So
Absolutely.
that may be stealing data, that may be trying to trash systems. And there has been a number of SMEs that have been hit. So in some of the work that we've done with some of our cybersecurity forums and councils, we've had insight into some of the police incidents that have occurred in this area.
Yeah.
And it's not that uncommon for an ex-employee, particularly if they're in the IT department, to be offboarded, or sorry, to be let go, but not offboarded.
Wow.
And then they enact their revenge over a weekend, thinking that they're really clever because obviously they know how IT works, and they know how to avoid getting caught. So
Well, they think they do.
invariably, they're not as clever as they think they are, but that's of little consequence when the network's been trashed because something bad's happened. So
damage is done.
The key point here is if somebody is leaving, it is absolutely in the company's best interest to sever their connection to the systems as soon as possible. If you know someone's going to be leaving, give your IT department or your MSP a heads up. We're going to be letting somebody go at noon today.
Yes.
At least they're on standby and ready, so they can be ready to press the button, sever the connection, so that then at that point they can no longer the person that's left can no longer get back in.
Brilliant. Okay, we're going to go to number 11 now, which is one which has become more prevalent since the advent of COVID, the remote work policy.
Yeah, and you can kind of see how this is kind of like filling in some of the gaps from all the other ones. This is essentially most of the things that are above, but for people that when they're working at home. So how do you make sure that they've got the appropriate guardrails to work within? What do you expect from them? Do you expect them to do more things? So this may run hand in hand with the BYOD policy, or the acceptable use policy, or the network security policy. It's looking at how do you make sure that the people that are working remotely, whether it's at home or on the road, how have they got the right security measures in place? How do you make sure that they're using their company devices correctly? We touched on in one of the last podcasts around separating the home networks. You might want to have something like that depending on the nature. But part of this should also talk around, what is that company engagement expectation? So if you've got a remote work policy, you might say, okay, well, we're going to have a daily call with the team to bring everyone in, or we're going to have a weekly call or something like that, but just something that caters to that inclusivity.
Yeah, we're going to have a future podcast on remote working anyway. Dedicated to
and it's especially important if you've got people that are 100% remote.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and finally, number 12, the compliance and audit policy.
Yeah, so the usefulness with this one really is it shows that you've thought about your direction of travel. And you've documented what you're doing. So the danger if you don't have a compliance and audit policy is that some of these things might just feel a bit scattered on this. We're doing this because it sounds good. We're doing this because it feels right. What we're saying here is these are all the things that apply to us. So depending on the industry that we're in, it may be any regulations or standards that are commonplace. It talks around any certifications that you might have and how often you would be assessed or audited around those things. So it's really, really easy. You might say as part of this, we'll strive to be Cyber Essentials Plus. And we'll be audited once a year for this, and we will do X, Y, and Z in advance. So you're just laying it all out so that the organization knows that, say, maybe 3 months before it's due for renewal, there's going to be lots of work going on.
Absolutely.
Getting everything straight and checking everything's okay.
Okay, so that's what occurs to me actually is that if you're our audience is typically business owners, CEOs, CFOs. They don't execute IT themselves. I've said this before. Actually, if you were to sit down as a business owner, managing director, and look at each of those policies, read it through and say, yeah, I accept that in plain English. You did one a week for the next 12 weeks. In a quarter, you'd have defined all the policies that your business would need. And in tandem with that, start rolling that out to people, training and signing where necessary for employees and such like. Within 3 to 4 to 6 months, you could be compliant. You could have policies which are compliant with your insurance, or put you in a good place to get insurance, and will put you in a good place to get something like Cyber Essentials Plus. Is that fair to say?
Definitely, yeah. Because these are the contents of these. It's all about common sense and good practice, and a lot of the things that will go into here are probably things that are already happening anyway. It's just they've not been committed to paper.
And it's one of those old things, and it's that everything's complicated and frightening until you actually open up the box, have a look in and go, actually, it's not complicated and frightening at all. It's just 12 policies which are worth reading, having a debate about. Generally, it has to be said that most templated policies will suit you. You just need to read, make sure there's nothing you need to exclude or include. Take some advice from your MSP or from your IT department, or get somebody in to help you through that process. But within 3 to 6 months, you could have a whole. If you're aggressive, you could do it in a much shorter time. And it, as you said before, by taking this seriously, it means that you're serious about your cybersecurity, and that makes you a good business partner for both your suppliers and your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, policies will be prevalent in any business, and IT and cybersecurity should be no different. And this is just a case of documenting and formalising the approach.
Actually, it's worthwhile saying that I've worked for various businesses where health and safety, if you work in an organisation with machinery or anything like the health and safety aspect, that will typically be on the board meeting's first item on the agenda. And there's no reason why cybersecurity shouldn't soon follow afterwards, because it is just as important and is just as risky to your business as health and safety. And it could mean the future employment or not, and continuity of your business. Toby did that in relatively quick time, and I congratulate you. The final whistle has gone. But unfortunately, you lost on penalties because you used just too many words.
No. Well.
But there you go. Maybe next time. I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Thank you very much, Toby, for that concise outlining of those policies. So we were very pleased actually to be speaking to a few people the other day, Toby, and somebody mentioned this podcast.
Yeah, actually, as chance would have it, I was speaking to one of you out there, and you commented that you were a regular listener, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
What we'd like to make the offer actually is that we know that sometimes we may not cover topics that you would like to see us cover, or you may have specific questions. If you send an email to enquiries@cybersafe.co.uk, that's enquiries@cybersafe.co.uk, cybersafe being one word, you could post any question in there. If you'd like us not to mention your name, do say so if it's about a sensitive subject, but we'll try and cover that in a future podcast. We'll be delighted to chat about it and have your feedback. If you want to write to us and tell us that actually I was perhaps unfair in penalising Toby there for using too many words, then you can tell me that. Or other comments would be most welcome. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much, Toby, for that this week, and hopefully everybody will see you next time. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of episode 36 of our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and to make sure you don't miss out on our future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple or Google Podcast. For more cybersecurity wisdom and resources, head over to our website at cybersafe.co.uk. See you next Thursday.